Soil science is my passion, and as a soil scientist, it's most important to me that these tools are made accessible for our future.
Hello, and welcome to Learning Lab. This is Earth's online community where we've been sharing tools, skills, and stories for ecological regeneration. I'm Sophia Rockland. I'm our host and our facilitator, and I've been loving having conversations with land stewards, experts, and enthusiasts all around the world who are applying low-tech, simple, and effective techniques for regeneration that apply locally and globally. So welcome to Learning Lab. If you haven't joined us already, be sure to subscribe for our event calendar, which is a Luma link, which you can find in today's show notes, where we post future episodes of Learning Lab, but also really cool community calls where Earth shares information about funding rounds for community-led regeneration. Today, we are joined by Bobby Nicholson in California in the United States, and Bobby is going to take us into the wild underworld of worms, microbiology, and composting. This session is our first outdoors learning lab. We are at Shannon Family of Wines, where Bobby is literally going to be taking handfuls of soil and playing with worms and showing with you some of the in-depth but also quite simple techniques for regenerating soil. Bobby is the founder of Compost Depot, which is an awesome organization educating people from, small children at schools to corporations that are working to make their food processing more regenerative, basically feeding back into the soil and into communities. So super excited to have Bobby here with us today, and stick around for the end of this session where we have a live Q&A with folks who join us live for this Learning Lab. If you want to join us live in the future, you can also do that by registering for future sessions in our Luma link. Okay, so without further ado, we are going into the field, playing with the worms, and Bobby, I will let you take it away.
Hi, everyone. Happy Monday, and thanks so much for joining us with Earth and Compost Depot this morning. I am based in Northern California, and at the core, Compost Depot is an educational platform providing on-site, in-school, and community programming about how compost is made as a tool for our future. And one pile at a time, we re-envision material streams to divert them from the landfill. We get our hands dirty together, building compost programs, and use a microscope to make healthy soil science lessons accessible to everyone. Here at Shannon Family of Wines, we are at Captain Clay's flow-through worm farm. And Captain Clay's flow-through worm farm was designed to embrace the winery wastewater, the pumice from the grape growing and winemaking process, and all of their cardboard that is to be recycled from their production line. And we re-envision that material through a thermophilic compost program. And once we have achieved our California certified organic farming regulations, we're able to use that compost directly in 1,000 acres of organic vineyard, and then feed that compost to our windrows in our flow-through worm farm. The worms then continue to digest that compost compassionately, and with their digestive enzymes, they magnify the beneficial biology that we have grown in the compost program from the millions into the billions. And with that biologically complete, nutrient-dense castings that is their output, we are building a trio of biologically complete, nutrient-dense soil amendments. Today, we'll be taking 3 learning units to walk through Captain Clay's worm farm. The first will be here at the windrows, talking about the feedstocks and the compost process that we go through to then feed the flow-through worm farm. Then we'll talk about the worms, their compassionate process, and the trio of biologically rich amendments that we're developing with their help. And then we'll walk through how we build those biologically complete amendments through aeration and water extraction into a liquid extract and a leachate that we're able to inject directly into the drip tape irrigation on the 1,000-acre organic vineyard. So here we are at Shannon Family of Wines in Lake County, California, in the Northern Bay Area. And we are on the lands of the Kanaktai Pomo Nation and are very grateful to present these tools to you today. Thank you so much for joining, and let's get dirty. So, in building the fertility program at Shannon Family of Wines, Compost Depot first evaluated the materials that in their production line they were producing and then trucking away to the landfill or putting down the drain. And first, their winery wastewater goes through a treatment process of 3 lagoons where it drains from one to the next. And by being fed biology during that process, we begin to amend that wastewater. Once it's run through that 3 lagoon system, we pump that wastewater directly into tanks that we're using to aerate our thermophilic compost program, hydrate our thermophilic compost program when we aerate. And so we were able to start engaging with that wastewater in a new way. The large-scale input that we have at the winery is the pressed grape pumice. And after harvesting the grapes and taking them through the winery, we have the skins and the stems and the seeds of those grapes that are all rich in nitrogen and biological activity that can be harnessed. And we develop a thermophilic compost program with that grape pumice, wood chips for our carbon, the cardboard from the production line, and then we hydrate that thermophilic compost program with the wastewater from the winery. When referring to thermophilia, that is the temperature-related activity of the beneficial biology that we are building in our compost programs. And I would be remiss not to mention that my mentor, Dr. Elaine Ingham, developed the Healthy Soil Food Web. And if we could pull up the Healthy Soil Food Web slide, the beneficial biology that we're speaking of, where bacteria and then fungi are able to feed on the feedstocks that we bring together in a compost program, and with oxygen and water, we're able to grow those beneficial biology as they continue to eat those raw input materials and break them down into the compost and the finished organic matter that we know and use to feed our plants. So in building the compost programs with our raw feedstocks of the pumice, wood chips, cardboard, and wastewater, we also engage with other beneficial materials that can support both the worm's health and then plant health in the long term where we apply that compost. And so we use a percentage of biochar in each of our compost programs. And we source that locally from practitioners that are developing biochar. And then we're able to inoculate that biochar with additional biology that we want to contribute to our soil and terroir or to benefit our plants. And we engage with that material as one of our carbons in the compost ratio of nitrogen to carbon. We take the raw materials through the thermophilic compost program by monitoring temperature. And the beneficial biology window of 131 degrees to 148 degrees is our ideal window of cultivating the beneficial biology that's eating and pooing and eating and breaking down that material and generating the temperature that then indicates that we are in that beneficial window. And we want to maintain that by adding oxygen and water. So from a large-scale program like we're doing here at Shannon Family of Wines to your at-home compost pile, the most important tools to bring to your compost program is that access to water so that you can hydrate regularly, your tools so that you'll be able to aerate and turn your program easily, and most importantly, your thermometer. And an at-home gardening thermometer is accessible at most garden stores, and you will use that to monitor the temperature of your compost program and maintain that beneficial temperature window of 131 to 148 degrees by adding oxygen and adding water. With that complete compost that we have taken through the California Certified Organic Farming regulations, we're able to use that compost directly in the vineyards to feed the soil and the vines. But mainly, we build that compost so that we can feed our flow-through worm farm windrows. And here we have two 100-foot windrows that are full of worms. Red wriggler worms are the worms that we chose for this worm farm because of their vigorous ability to digest material and to reproduce. And we have introduced thousands of worms to these piles about a year ago. And now we believe that our count is near 1 million of worms in these piles. They have eaten, reproduced, and their byproduct has been a full windrow of worm castings. The way that we manage these windrows on the flow-through worm pad, as you can see behind me, it's a cement pad with 2 rows that drain into the middle where there is a trap that runs down the pad through a simple filter that catches all of our larger debris and drains what we call our first of the biological amendments, leachate. Leachate is essentially a runoff from the windrow that we are hydrating with wastewater. And through a 3-day process of hydration, we take that red, smelly wastewater byproduct and transition it into a earthy, healthy smelling biological amendment by heavily aerating this lagoon and then cycling it through the hydration system of the windrows. We monitor all of the health of our biology, both in the winery lab by testing our pH, our dissolved oxygen, and our electrical conductivity, along with temperature, weekly as we produce this leachate. This product, we believe to be a real micronutrient, feeding the soil and the elements that we pull out of the soil through the plants each season. And this micronutrient is addressing boron, and manganese counts in the soil so that we can continue to rejuvenate our terroir as we prepare for the season. And this is produced weekly and then injected directly into the drip irrigation of the 1,000 acres of organic vineyard.
Bobby, can I ask a quick question?
Please.
I'd love to know, just like to get a bit of the lay of the land. Like, it sounds like Shannon Family of Wines is a regenerative agricultural business, and you are a big part in like actually bringing them there. Like, how did you get connected with them? Do you feel like in California more broadly there's a desire to move into regeneration? And can you offer a little context of like what is the status quo of how business is currently run, and how is this like very different? Because I think, for folks viewing today, like this is a magnificently unique situation. And yeah, I would just love to learn, like Bobby, we've discussed before, like some of the major issues with methane emissions just from like people throwing out organic food waste and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd love to just get a little more context for like composting in California and then dive right back in.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So, as Compost Depot works on site with farms and vineyards, we generally align with organic practitioners or those that are trying to transition to organic. So that building healthy soil programs and training their workforce, building that capacity within their team to make healthy soil on site is valued. And today in California, data is showing that upwards of 60% of a unseparated domestic trash can is full with food waste. 60% of a trash can is green and food waste if not separated. And with that, there's a lot of material that we can divert from the landfill and then engage with in healthy soils programs. And Compost Depot aligns with teams of all sizes, but finds that the most important part is that the team on location that does the work every day has those tools themselves and is able to harness healthy soils programs and see those results in their farming practices. And that's how we grow one pile at a time. And this is an advanced program. Captain Clay and Shannon Family of Wines is committed in a large way teaching these skills to the next generations. So we've built the capacity within their workforce, and their team knows to separate these materials, how to build the compost programs, how to maintain the flow-through worm farm. And Compost Depot is able to carry on a new location, teaching another team now. So in that regenerative, cyclical mentality, we want to grow one pile at a time in a simple skill building process that can be tools that everyone can use. So here at Captain Clay's worm farm, we evaluated the materials that needed to be re-envisioned. We built the capacity within their workforce team to make their own compost and maintain the worm farm. And then we designed this flow-through worm farm at a large scale to harness the leachate and produce castings at a large scale so that when the castings are complete, we have magnified that beneficial biology from the millions to the billions. And now we can use that directly on the vines. But most importantly, we're really excited about developing liquid extract of the biology from the worm castings into a liquid form that we're able to use both in the drip irrigation, but then to spray all over the vineyards to address both pathogens and animal pressures. And we're really excited about experimenting with organic alternatives that we're building on site to address leafhoppers, which are nesting and developing their populations on the vines in the spring now. And then another foliar that we're developing for botrytis and mildew mold that is starting to grow as our temperatures here in Northern California rise and moisture persists through the spring. And generally, a sulfur would be sprayed as that foliar, and we're developing a worm casting liquid extract base to be an alternative foliar to that sulfur that's purchased and sprayed. And we've now developed enough of the worm castings that we're able to make that available to the public and have been selling Captain Clay's worm castings wholesale and are working on our OMRI certification to be able to make the worm castings available to the public. And if you are able to come and visit the Mercantile and Captain Clay's worm farm here in Kelseyville, Lake County, California, those castings are available for purchase for you to bring and use in your home gardens. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to the worms. And they're here in the windrows, and I just invited a few up to join us as we speak about our compassionate decomposers. And here we are. Here's a bit of a population. And we've got a nice mature population here of worms where anatomy-wise, we can see very clearly their egg sac developed so that these worms are ready to reproduce and are feeling comfortable to be able to continue to eat and grow and work through this material to produce their worm castings. Now the worms produce those worm castings in this windrow, and this outside portion of the windrow is where we are currently feeding and hydrating the worms' food so that they're feeling more comfortable and cared for on this specific side of the windrow. And then behind me, the outside side of that windrow here. And that helps us coordinate the activity of the worms to continue to digest the material in a systematic or consistent process. And we're directing where they're existing more comfortably so that then their compassionate digestion is directed in that way, that then as we begin to see that the worms have digested this side of the windrow, we will slowly start to peel back the castings that they are leaving in their path as we feed and water them over onto the other side of the windrow. That is about a 6 to 8 month process, and we're a month and a half, almost 2 months into rebuilding these windrows, having harvested all the castings last season, reintroduced our worms to the new material, and now we're feeding them through the new windrows. Every time that we water the windrow, the water drains through the pad and into this drain and into a 1,000-gallon lagoon here that we heavily aerate with oxygen that we pump through a diaphragm pump. And that pump is running all the time, 24 hours a day, while we have leachate in the system to ensure the anaerobic, the biology gets enough oxygen and is able to maintain aerobic environments. And with leachate being a very volatile material, that oxygen ensures the health of the biology in the healthy soil food web that we're cultivating and then wanting to spread onto the vineyard. The leachate is on a schedule of watering, aeration, and then is pumped into trailers and taken directly to the vineyard irrigation system. We then clean this system thoroughly each week and ensure the health of the biology that we'll continue to harness from the windrows. As the castings are developed in the windrow, we harvest those with shovels and a trommel sifter to ensure that we keep all of the worms in the windrow and harvest the healthy soil worm castings from the windrow to then make our liquid extract. The liquid extract is a process of washing biology through a mesh bag. So we put the worm castings in a ratio of measurement into a mesh tea bag, essentially. That's 200 micron count, so that we can ensure that we wash the biology through the water. We put that sack into a water tank, and we make 250 gallons of liquid extract at a time. We're actually brewing 1,000 gallons today. So we develop a system of our aerators being able to aerate multiple tanks that each have their worm castings in them, extracting. And then we'll pump that into a tank and take that directly to the vineyards, where it'll either be used as a spray foliar or injected directly into the irrigation. That process is very important to both monitor temperature, the pH, our dissolved oxygen, and our electrical conductivity as well. So we make those solutions and then we test them in our winery lab before we send them out into the field. And at home, a liquid extract can be made very easily with a 5-gallon bucket and a 200 micron extract sack that can be found at a local gardening store or on the internet. Synergy Agriculture is a great resource for that equipment. One handful of compost or worm castings can be used in a 5-gallon bucket extract. And just one handful will wash billions of that biology into that 5 gallons of water that then you would dilute 1 gallon to 10 gallons of water, so that your 5 gallons of liquid extract now can become 50 gallons of nutrient-rich liquid food for your garden. And then you can distribute that all over your plants and on the ground in your garden to feed the soil and your future crops.
And Bobby, I've heard once that, in 1 teaspoon, I think it is, of like healthy soil, there are billion microorganisms or something like that. Is that right? Like, have you ever looked
Totally.
with a microscope and seen like what is going on inside that soil? Who's in there? What are they doing? Like, how is it possible that you can fertilize a whole field with just a small handful of healthy soil?
Yes, it is correct. And that one handful of castings has billions of beneficial biology in it. That's more than the people on the earth. And let me tell you, when I'm holding a handful of castings and I know that there's more beneficial biology than people on this earth, I feel better. With that one handful of beneficial biology can spread that much further. And that's how, with 250 gallons of a liquid extract, we're able to make 2,500 gallons of a nutrient that can be put out into a vineyard, so that it scales very exponentially like that. And yes, your at-home compost, when it is stable and complete, will have billions of count of both beneficial bacteria, nematodes, protozoa, amoebas, and then the hyphae of the fungal families that would be growing as well. And when I refer to biologically complete amendments, that biology is all being counted. Microscopic biology is being counted before we put that out into the fields. And next learning lab, microscopy. We got to see this stuff, and it's a really special part of what we do. We monitor all of our programs with microscopy to ensure that beneficial biology is alive and doing well as we distribute that out into the fields. So, as we evaluate the work that the worms are doing in your worm farm, there'll be a process of them needing to have that material well hydrated so that it's comfortable for them to do their digestive work. And right here I have some castings in my finger, and the way that this material crystallizes and spreads, that texture is a real indicator of the biology that the worms have contributed to the compost through their digestive process. And so you will be able to very easily see the difference between your raw food material and paper and charcoal that you may feed your worm farm, and then your finished result casting. And that smear in the texture of that soil is very, very clear to the eye, and something that I look forward to sharing with all of you in person sometime. And at this point, I would love to address any questions so that we could continue to deliberate about what people want to speak about further.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bobby. Yeah, I'm super excited. It's been on my wish list to have the worms squiggling on the screen. So thank you. Can we get a close look at them? Nice. Looking good, guys. Thank you so much. Awesome. So yeah, for folks who are in the area, Bobby has extended an invitation to come and visit, and I'll drop information about that in the chat. So Bobby, we have a question from Bubakar. He's asking, can this type of vermicompost enriched with biochar and organic waste regenerate poor tropical soils like those in Middle Guinea in West Africa? And if so, what's the most effective way to apply it?
Great question. Thanks for bringing a local question to our global learning lab. I love that. And I believe that, yes, with the power of the amount of biology that we're developing with a worm farm, even a tabletop worm farm in your garden. Feeding the worms that biochar and that organic waste in combination is very good for the worm's digestion. The biochar, like for our digestion, provides a grit that the worms really benefit from eating. Then, not all of that biochar will be completely digested, but it will be in your castings, and it will become a carrier of all of that microbiology that is inherent in the worm castings. It will travel in the biochar. The biochar will also hold water and prevent erosion, which I know are two of the key tools to regenerate a tropical soil. Also, without seeing the soil, I would believe that there may be a large amount of sand and then potentially rock that you're dealing with in larger ratios. And that the other element of soil is clay. And bringing in that moisture and that organic material with the vermi castings and then compost will continue to feed the existing soil and contribute to that trilogy of rock, sand, and clay that you want to develop to then have that biology have a complete food triangle.
Yeah, and in the past, we've had a guest talk about like just a simple at-home soil test in the jar. So you can actually take your soil in a jar, right? Do you know the jar test? How does that go, Bobby?
So you want to take a like a quart container like this and flip it over so that the opening's on the bottom. And you're going to want to submerge that into the soil and get a nice like soil plug. And then you're going to fill that with water and you're going to put a top on it and you're going to hydrate that material really well by shaking it. And then you're going to let it sit. And it's going to show you that rock, clay, and sand and the content that you have in your soil in that jar as it settles after shaking. That's a great way to start kind of being familiar with what you're working with. Now, the final part of that question was, how do we apply? I am in this larger scale format applying mainly with the leachate and liquid extract so that the biology can be spread further and faster. But worm castings can be applied a handful in each fresh hole where you're planting. I would strongly advise considering, once you are making the worm castings and you feel comfortable with that process, developing a liquid extract, because that biology can be spread that much more exponentially. And that can go directly into your irrigation if it is able to be filtered correctly and diluted, or a liquid drench that's sprayed onto the plants or the ground.
So cool. And I know Boubacar is planting avocado and coffee and a bunch of other species. So it's really awesome to just have that knowledge pollinated from California to West Africa. It's awesome. It's just global, it makes sense everywhere. So
Please reach out directly however I can support, and we can speak further about any other questions you may have. Happy to connect.
so cool. We got another question, or a couple questions. It wasn't clear to me how you move the worms from one box to another box. And can you, in the best way you can, show it more or just explain it a little bit more, how worms are they moving from one box to another box at any point?
So in this system, we refer to it as, which way? This way. We refer to it as like a windrow. So it's like a pile, and that would be our box, essentially. And the way that we move the worms through that box is water and food. And so in a smaller scale, with boxes that stack on top of each other and then that drain out through the bottom, you would start with your initial layer with your worms and your food, and then as they have digested that food and that starts to look like a more finished casting, you would put your next layer on. You would add your bedding and your food. That's your cardboard, your paper, your wood chips, your biochar, your food waste, or finished compost. All of that can go in there, and that then is food that the worms will climb up into the next tier of your tray if there's holes there for them to climb up through. So first you start with your initial layer, you feed them, you cover that, and you ensure that they're feeding that on that material. Once it starts to change its characteristics into more of a casting, then you would feed them an additional layer that they'll travel up to. So like our farm flows through down, the stacking tray farms flow up.
And you can track the characteristics of the castings in the soil by that texture, as you were saying, just by getting to familiar with that kind of crystal-like thing and the smear.
Exactly. As soon as you see that being able to have that crystallized smear texture, you know you've got a worm casting compared to your coffee grounds and your cardboard and your charcoal and your compost that you fed them. That's going to look a lot different when you start. And one of the most important parts about the smaller systems is just ensuring that hydration, making sure that they're wet enough, that they have that moisture and good airflow so that they can continue to grow.
All right, we got another question from Justin. Justin asks, "How could you comment some on the filters and pumps that you're using for aerating the leachate? Diaphragms lose their seal so quickly when they get gunked up, and curious what parts of the leachate system are the hardest to keep up."
Great question.
Sounds like Justin knows what they're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, Synergy Agriculture is a great distributor of high-powered diaphragm pumps, and
Oh yeah.
there it is.
You can see
that's
it.
that's the diaphragm pump right there. And so that stands by, has its power run to it, and then it runs its oxygen into the lagoon. Now, the lagoon, it has a very simple filter right there, and it's like a box that's perforated, literally just catching large overs, wood chips, and some of the grape seeds, to refrain that from going into the lagoon. So essentially here at the lagoon, it's a heavily aerated system that then, when we are pumping into a trailer tank to transport to the farm, we'll run all of the liquid that we're pumping through that 200 micron mesh count to ensure that we're catching any other overs, particles that may affect the irrigation that we're going to pump the leachate into, and then return any of those back into the physical program. These systems are cleaned weekly, if not bi-weekly. The lagoon, the pump system, the drains, any filters, any extract sacs, all the tanks that we use, we clean those with hydrogen peroxide and ensure sterility, so that then the biology that we're introducing for the next system is able to just ensure that health. So it's a very regularly cleaned and maintained system to ensure that health of the biology. And I'd say that with leachate and a leachate system, that is where you have the most complexity, because you do not want to have additional biology that you're not in control of or heavily aerating and being able to ensure is healthy, maintaining its growth pattern in the system and joining a new cohort of biology. So best practices, there's cleaning up as we set up, and then there's cleaning up and sterilizing as we wrap up. And I'd say that those are really important keys of this larger scale program where we're harnessing the leachate. As I said earlier, many practitioners would say that leachate is not a biological amendment that's easy to use and harness, and we're not making it available to sale because of its volatility. We're able to build it to a beneficial biology characteristic and then use it directly in our own farming practices. So definitely, as I said, like monitoring the health with the labs and the microscopy regularly to ensure that health. And leachate is different than the liquid extract that we're making with clean water in a water tank with a measured amount of worm castings. And that is a more stable biological amendment that we are researching how to extend the shelf life of and make accessible to all of you in the future.
That would be awesome. Cool. Nice, nice, nice. Okay, well, I mean, Bobby, I'm curious, like, how does one become a soil? Like, how did you get into soil science? Because as far as I know, this was not always your path. Like, I would love to just hear a little bit more about your journey on this path of becoming soil scientist, compost wizard, educator, from, school children to companies, like such a broad, you found a beautiful niche to be working in. And also if you could tell us about like Compost Depot more broadly, like what do you guys do and how is it created? Just so we can get more of a sense of like, what is the source of this amazing work that you're doing here?
Thanks so much, Sophia. So Compost Depot was inspired by farmers that I was able to spend time with on their farms, seeing that they needed support both in building their own soil health and maintaining their compost programs. I spent 15 years making television commercials and was an art educator and in video production after art school for a number of years in Los Angeles. And during that time, I became aware of the radical microbiologist, Dr. Elaine Ingham, who had been doing her practices in multiple universities, kind of being asked to move on because of her radical perspective, really challenging the existing microbiology departments in those schools. She ended up at Oregon State University and developed an amazing series of soil science educations and a certification, a soil health certification that I was able to take online and certify in soil health and microscopy through her trainings. She passed earlier this year, and Dr. Elaine Ingham's teachings and her radical approach to science will be something that I will carry on for my whole career in soil health practice. Super grateful for her educational components and passion around microbiology, and inspired by her practices, I started to harness healthy soils one pile at a time, really, on friends' farms first, and then experimenting with developing larger scale programs. And it really is a local offering where I come on site, re-envision material streams with the team, develop the compost programs on location, teach the team and build that capacity within their workforce to make the healthy soils programs themselves. And then we use those programs as a platform for our educational offerings and teach others from the programs like Captain Clay's Worm Farm, and then make those products available to the public. And I support teams in taking their excess healthy soil that they don't need to use on their own fields, and we make that available both to the public and other practitioners. And so Compost Depot is my art. Soil science is my passion. And as a soil scientist, it's most important to me that these tools are made accessible for our future.
Amazing. I'm so inspired, and I'm dying to be like looking with a microscope with you. I really want to get into just understanding like who are the little microorganisms and what roles do they play. And it's just such like an amazing thing that I've noticed, in my own working with earth and gardening. It's really like you have an issue, and then it sometimes just really doesn't take that much to change things. I mean, obviously, this is like an extremely robust setup, but just a little bit of attention to the water and the creatures. And it's kind of a very delicate alchemy, but it's not rocket science. And I feel like sometimes people can be overwhelmed by the task of regeneration. But as we see with things like this, you have a very built up setup, but you can start building, you can have like a worm box in maybe your bedroom and your kitchen, your backyard. I don't know where the best spot would be, but it's happen in exactly. Yeah. Right. So I'd love to like, as a closing note, like what's just like, for folks that maybe don't have a sweet hookup at a regenerative agriculture farm like you, like what's a great way to just start to get your hands dirty and exploring, vermicomposting?
Great question. Thanks, Sophia. It's really fun to explore these practices of regeneration at small scale in our homes, because those are the tools that then will empower us to make great change. A 5-gallon bucket with perforated holes and a tray to catch the liquid underneath is a great way to start underneath your kitchen sink, so that you can make sure it's shaded, you can put your food waste in it, and ensure that that your population of worms is continuing to grow and is healthy. Just like your at-home composting program, there's a number of tabletop systems that are starting to develop where you can compost right in your kitchen if you don't have an outdoor space, but that starting with even a trash can with perforated holes at the bottom of it for aeration can be a great way to start an in-vessel compost program. I love piles, and so I always say it's as simple as a pile. And if you're able to have a little bit of space in your backyard, there's a number of great examples of how to set up small at-home composting programs yourself. Dr. Elaine Ingham's model is one wooden pallet for aeration at the bottom, and then a circular fencing as the walls. And so a cylinder that sits on top of your 3x3 foot pallet that you can then build your compost pile inside, open it up, turn it. And so those are a couple different scales that are fun to get started with. And then by all means, reach out to me at thecompostdepot.com. Let's connect, let's get dirty, and I'm happy to support anyone, anywhere in building healthy soils.
All right, Bobby, thank you for weathering the elements with us. I know the sun was starting to rise, so I appreciate you taking the time to educate our global community. We had folks calling in from France, Guinea, the Piedmont in North Carolina in the United States. And it's just such a gift for me to be able to see folks call in from all around the world and get to learn how we can apply these tricks, tips, and tools, and even stories sometimes to our regenerative endeavors. So thank you for joining us so much. Be sure to subscribe to our Luma calendar for updated Learning Lab invitations. And if you ever have a topic that you want to learn about, just write us at community@maearth.com, and we will do our best to find awesome, enthusiastic educators so we can keep this peer-to-peer learning space open. And we can regenerate hand in hand. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time in the Learning Lab.